Hi, this is Rich Uzdowski. I'm here with Ball State Center for Middletown Studies. We're doing an interview with Bill Fields for the Southside Oral History Project, and we're going to be talking about the high school consolidation that recently occurred here in Muncie. So if you wouldn't mind saying your name for us, Bill, and then we could start off with one of the questions I have for you today.
All right. Well, yeah, my name is Bill Fields.
Okay, and would you mind telling us your address, your age, occupation, just some general stuff about you?
Sure. I'm 42 years old. I live at 3126 South Grant Street here in Muncie. I'm a general manager at the South Advanced Auto Parts store here in town.
Okay, good. And we're just going to jump right in here. The big question, of course, is what are your thoughts and opinions on the high school consolidation? And have those thoughts and opinions changed since the decision was made?
I don't think it was a good move. I think it's way too many children in one building. I think there was other options that could have been looked at instead of consolidating the high schools. And my opinions haven't changed at all since the town hall meetings.
Okay, so you're saying you still think there were more options on the table?
Yeah, there were definitely more options. We give them options with numbers, and they didn't want to listen.
And when you say they, who do you mean?
Tim Heller and the school board.
Okay, so you kind of saw it as an us-them
Basically,
sort
yes.
of thing?
Yes, they had made a decision, in my opinion, at the first town hall meeting. I was interviewed by the Star Press at that time and stated that to them, that, that was the last year of Muncie Southside as we knew it. And, we were just waiting for the time. They had already made a decision before they did the town hall meetings, in my opinion.
Okay, and what made you think that they'd already made a decision?
Just by the demeanor of the way the board carried themselves. It was supposed to be about bus consolidation, is what they first presented it as when the meeting started. And not once did they really talk about buses. They went straight into talking about schools and give you options at A through G, or A through H rather, of how they could cut costs in the school consolidations.
Okay, and you're saying that you were, and everybody else who was putting options to the board, they didn't hear you. So would you say your voice wasn't heard? Your voice personally was not heard?
It wasn't heard at all. No, I don't think they were looking for ideas. They were just, they had to make it look like they were getting input, in my opinion.
Okay, so and you felt that from the beginning.
From the very beginning.
So why did you still step up to the plate and voice your opinion?
I was trying to do what was best, what I thought for my kids, and trying to save the school and the kids in the community. I fought it out as long as I could. I went to all 4 of the town meetings and spoke at every one of them.
Yeah, and you obviously thought what was best for your kids was to move them to Monroe Central?
Yeah, that was definitely the best the best option after the decision was made by the board and the superintendent.
And when in this whole process did you and your family decide to move them?
We decided November of last year. As soon as the decision was made, I called and talked to Mr. Moulton, the school principal, set up a tour of the school. We toured the facility, talked to them about their advanced placement courses and college courses that they offered, and what the school was about. Met with the athletic directors because my boys are both involved in sports. And got a good feel for the school and sit down and talk to the boys and let them decide where they wanted to go.
So you definitely included your kids in this?
Oh yeah, they had every bit of the decision making. If they would have decided to go to Muncie Central, that would have been them,
Okay. And would you mind telling us how old and how many kids you have?
Yeah, I've got 3 children. One had already graduated from Southside. She's 19. She's
Okay.
now currently at Ball State. And I've got a 16-year-old that's a junior at Monroe Central, and I've got a 13-year-old that's an 8th grader at Monroe Central.
Okay, and what drew you to Monroe Central?
We looked at all the county schools, and like I said, advanced placement courses were the ones that we looked at the most. Both of my kids are looking to get into college, and they want to get credit ahead of time, of course.
Sure.
And also, then you think of the traveling. We looked at Wapahani, we looked at Cowan in some of the schools. Monroe Central was the most, with the last winter that we had, it seemed the most reasonable for travel because it's all highway, straight to bypass 32, and I thought it'd be the easiest to get there in inclement weather.
Now, were there others like you that moved away and sent their kids to different schools?
Oh, there was. We've got 30 kids alone that transferred just to Monroe Central.
Huh.
That's what the Star Press is reporting. I think it's a little more than that.
And have you talked to anybody who moved their kids to Monroe Central or somewhere else outside of the Muncie public school system like you did?
I talked to several of the parents because we're all meeting, at the sporting events and in different places, and they're very happy with the transition. The hospitality out at Monroe Central has been phenomenal. The difference in the kids' attitudes are even different. I mean, it's just a whole different atmosphere out there. It's been a good move.
Okay. And kind of going back to your voice being heard and what you said at the town hall meetings, do you feel like you spoke for or with a certain neighborhood or side of town?
I think most of the south side of Muncie agreed with what I was trying to say. We gave them numbers and facts on an option that they could have went with, and it wasn't even looked at. They had consolidated our schools on the south end of town as far as elementary a few years back, and went to 3 elementary schools. And we still have 6 elementary schools on the north side of town with an enrollment that is, some of them, not even half of what we have on the south side of town. And the main idea that I gave them was they could have closed those 3 down on the north side as far as elementary, and made it 3 on this side, 3 on the other, and it would have saved $2.996 million, where the consolidation of the high school was only $1.7 million. So it, obviously they wasn't looking at dollars; they were looking at what they wanted for their own benefit.
Huh. So you're saying there was some sort of ulterior motive going on for them to keep the 6 elementary schools on the north side?
Definitely. They wanted one high school. That was the only option, in my opinion.
Okay.
They wanted, the enrollment was dwindling down in each school, and to not sound too harsh, but I think it was more for, they wanted to keep their class ranking in sports.
Okay.
With the enrollment numbers.
Okay. Do you think aside from class ranking in sports, were there any other reasons you feel that why they meaning the administration and the board, I'm guessing?
Sure. Tim Heller, and when I say they, it's Tim Heller, Tony Costello,
Okay.
and the rest of the board.
So do you think there are any other reasons, motives, why they wanted to stick with just one school?
I think that was their main reason. They're big on, Mr. Costello made reference to, the background of Central and the history in their sports, and why he was, definitely there for keeping Central, and he made that clear in the town hall meetings.
Okay, so the tradition of Central, the fact that it's been there so
Sure.
long, the Central identity.
State championships, that was brought up, how they had 8 championships.
But there was also some South Side pride that was being shown at the town hall meetings. I mean, I watched all 4. I wasn't there, but I've watched all 4. And I think you could argue that the people who spoke for the South Side of town had some serious emotion. Definitely.
Yeah, we showed a lot of emotion. I mean, it was near and dear to everyone's heart on that side of town. The biggest part was they took away the rivalry in town. That was the biggest thing. We had the biggest turnout at the last Southside Central game last year of any sporting event around here in years, because people, they knew it was that the rivalry was gone, and that helped. It was fun.
So you enjoyed the rivalry.
Sure.
Okay, and you've kind of already touched on my next question, which is, did community identity play a role in how you approach the consolidation issue? So I take it you see yourself as a Southsider?
Yeah, I've lived over on the south side in the same house for 42 years now.
Okay. And now did the fact that you see yourself as a Southsider play into how you approach the consolidation?
It really didn't affect how I approached it as much as I just thought it was the best decision to have 2 high schools.
Okay.
We were already in a money crunch for busing. And we're going to bus everyone from the south side up to the north side of town, and it seemed like it was going to be more cost to me. None of it made sense as far as the dollar and cent side of it to me.
Okay, and you aren't the only person that we've interviewed who has said that financially speaking, the decision the board came to didn't make sense whatsoever. So what if they weren't looking at finances, what were they looking at? Or is that what you kind of meant before when you said the keeping their class
The
ranking
class sports, definitely.
Okay.
And, there was always, Wilson was going to go down out of the middle schools. I mean, that was the one that was going to go away. And that's just for the simple fact Northside wasn't going to get touched because the principal of Northside is the superintendent's daughter. So there was some loyalty there from the school board administration.
Sure. Okay, and keeping going with this north side, south side theme, I think we can safely say that there have been some north side, south side divisions in Muncie and that they've been around for a long time. And several of the speakers at the town hall meetings leading up to the consolidation expressed concern about the way students from both sides would interact. What do you think about this?
I think it's been a problem. Over the summer, they have football practice that they go to before the school year starts, and they weren't even practicing together. The Southside students were meeting over at Southside and practicing. The Central students were meeting over at Central and doing their practices, and they didn't even come together at first. I've got friends that still have kids in the Muncie school system, and they said that they're not getting fair treatment in the different events. I mean, they're not giving them an open arms like we're filling out at Monroe Central.
And when you mean the Central is not giving the Southsiders.
Right. Anyone's coming into the sports. I mean, and you can't blame them. They want their spots. I mean, it's limited the number of spots that's on a team. So you're not going to be as welcoming for sure to a whole other school coming in and fighting for those same spots.
What do you think about that?
I think a lot of kids are going to miss out for sure. I know I feel it keeps my kids out of trouble. They're at school practicing sports instead of running the streets, able to get themselves in trouble. It gives them discipline, gives them, time to interact with people in a good setting. And you've got several kids that won't make the team now that they're not going to have that structure and ability to get into a good environment. And then you look at the scholarship side of it. These kids, if they don't play, they're not going to be eligible for scholarships, and it could cost people their college career.
So it's almost like you're saying that the coming together of the high schools didn't just have an effect on the kids when they're literally in school, but that it affected the kids as parts of the community.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely affected that because, like I said, if you got practice you have to go to, you've got sporting events you're going to go to. If you're one of those that don't make the team, then that's going to give you a lot more free time on your hands and time to maybe make decisions that wouldn't be the right decisions.
What do you think about, because the statement I read before kind of insinuated that there would be some tension inside the school walls between Northsiders and Southsiders. Have you heard anything about that? Have any feelings about that?
Other than the getting the tension on the different sporting teams, that's the only tension that I've really heard. I haven't heard about any really fights or anything like that seemed to be anticipated.
Okay.
So it's went a little better as far as, not a lot of riots or, because everybody assumed the worst, when they first brought the idea up. And it hasn't gone nearly as bad as it could have been. But still don't agree with that many children in one building.
Sure. And what do you think, what role do you think a high school plays in a community's identity?
Well, it helps draw people in. With only one high school now, if a factory was going to move in, I think it's going to affect that. Other businesses decide they want to move in, they're going to look at the education in the area, they're going to look at population in the area, and it can affect your whole economy.
Okay, so you're definitely looking at a high school in the broader scheme of things. How it's kind of like what we were saying before, how the kids are part of the community, how they are in the high school affects their community life. And you're saying that a high school's place in the community affects the community as a whole.
Oh, I definitely feel it affects the economy, the stature of the way the city's looked at. We obviously have sent out a big sounding board to anybody that wanted to move in. Hey, Muncie's struggling right now. We can't afford our schools. We're going down to one. Me as a businessman, I wouldn't be my first option to come.
When you say Muncie's struggling, what do you mean by that?
Well, they couldn't pay for their buses, is what they're claiming. And when the administration said that this was the last year. Last year was the last year we were going to have buses, and they come to property owners wanting us to take a tax increase to pay for the buses, or they were no longer going to run after June of last year. Well, of course that got voted down, and they mandated that they had to have buses, and all of a sudden, we have buses again. So, it's just a way of telling them it's been a bad budgeting of money by the school board and by the administration.
Sure.
And they also, they spent the rainy day fund on the iPads. Give all the children iPads and use the rainy day fund for that instead of worrying about transportation and getting the kids to school.
So you're basically saying the issue is not did they have enough money or do they have enough money? It's where is that money going?
It's what they choose to do with it.
Okay. And that kind of brings up something else that was touched on at the town hall meetings. A couple of the speakers weren't so happy about the number of administrators that the Muncie public school system employs and how much those administrators make.
Oh, sure. We have the worst ratio, one of the worst ratios in Indiana as far as administrator to student ratio. There's way more than they need, and the average pay is $100,000. That's ridiculous to me. I mean, you've got teachers out here that's on the front line that they're barely making $50,000 a year, and we're paying these administrators to sit behind the desk and make decisions to cut their jobs double at least of what they're making. It just doesn't make good sense to me.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think?
Well, it's just like any big business. I mean, they're taking care of themselves.
Okay.
The decision making is for the corporate side of it instead of the people side of it, and that's just the way, unfortunately, that the world has come at this point, including our government.
Okay, you know what? Since you mentioned a larger issue like that, we can jump right to the question that I was going to ask you. Regarding bigger changes that might have been playing into the consolidation. Like, do you see any bigger, possibly economic changes that Muncie has been experiencing that kind of made the consolidation necessary? Economic changes, factories closing.
Well, yeah, Warner Gear going out. Broderick's used to be a big factory here in town.
Sure.
I mean, we've lost a lot of our factory jobs. If you want to get a job in Muncie now, you're going to be working fast food or you're working retail generally. I mean, there's no big money jobs in Muncie anymore. I mean, it's a retail atmosphere. If most of your factory jobs, you're traveling either to Fort Wayne, Marion, Anderson. If you're going to work in a GM or somewhere that's paying bigger money.
So what do you think we need to do to change that? What could bring students in or bring parents and families in so that students come with them?
We've got to make the area more appealing again. The biggest thing that could help is to finish building up the south side of Muncie. They've tore it down for so many years now by the Southwest Plaza. I mean, it used to be full of shopping centers and stores and banks and different things. Now it's just medical facilities. I mean, you've got your urgent cares, your dentist, you've got things like that nature in there. The Kmart South went out of business. I mean, it's just like that south end of town has been forgotten. And if we build that up again, like there's seem to be attempting to do at this point with the addition of the Walmart, the addition of the other shopping center there beside Walmart, I think we'll be able to appeal to more people and bring even more businesses in and get the community back.
Okay, and you're mentioning locations and businesses as important parts of the south side of town and what's going on there. What do you think that Southside High School, what role did it play on the south side of town, in the south side of town's identity?
Well, the closing of it as a high school has hurt the local businesses. We have all the restaurants there on Madison Street, and you had students there that actually drove to school. These children that go now, they can't drive. They're bussed in, so if you were stopping to get breakfast on the way in, that's no longer there. So you've hurt businesses already that way. Just since the consolidation, the local marsh there in the Southway Plaza has closed. It's just affected business on the south side in a lot of different ways. It's even affecting our business in the automotive parts retail on the south side of Muncie.
How so?
Sales are down. I worked in the Anderson location, and they had went through a similar consolidation not too many years back. And Anderson's still struggling in the advanced auto parts in that city because people moving out, people moving around, and going elsewhere.
Okay, and I have another question for you on the effects of the consolidation. This is more of a general question because you've touched on some specifics. But what are the general effects of the consolidation that you've seen so far, and maybe some that we haven't seen but you could predict for the future?
I think we'll continue to lose more children out of schools. That's going to be the biggest effect. It's going to continue to make people tend to move out of the city and get closer to the county schools just for traveling, because it's going to affect their personal finances as far as traveling back and forth. And it's just going to continue to make our city look bad. I mean, overall. You're not going to be appealing to new business, to people wanting to move. Right now, with all the publicity we've had in the news, if people are researching the town, it's not going to be a welcoming. Hey, come move in with us. We're doing well, because it's not there.
Yeah. And I take it that you would say that the board wasn't taking all of this into consideration when they made this decision.
Oh, not at all. And it was brought to their attention the whole time. If you watched all 4 meetings, you've seen that they were given lots of different, ideas and people's reactions to their decision making. And the biggest thing to me is the option that they ended up going with wasn't even one of the options that they presented in all 4 meetings. That was never one of the slides.
What does that say to you?
That their decision was made, and that was all for show. They wasted another $40,000 there just by having these town hall meetings, and their decision was made.
If we could go back in time and you could make the decision yourself in terms of what would have happened regarding consolidation or switching the school system up, what would you have done?
I would have consolidated the elementary schools on the north side of town first. That would have, it wouldn't have hurt business by any way, because you would have still had 3 schools on each side of town for elementary. Then you could have had a similar amount of students going to each school, and you would have saved just under $3 million compared to the $1.7 million we're saving. In business, no matter what kind of math you're doing, 1.7 compared to 2.9 million, it's a no-brainer.
Okay. And my last question here before I open it up to you to say whatever you would like is, what advice would you give to children growing up in Muncie today who are living in a city and school system that's changing?
My advice to children is look at all your options, weigh out, for academics, weigh out for your sports, think about what your future holds, and make the best decision for you as what school to go to. I don't know that the Muncie Community School System is the best choice anymore.
Okay, you know what? I got another one that made me think of something that I could ask you before I open up the floor to you. But do you think that the kids' considerations were taken into account?
No.
During the decision-making process?
Not at all. This was all about, what had already been decided. Mr. Heller had previously been the principal of Southside High School. And then he moved and was a superintendent in the Kentucky school system. And this same thing was done in Kentucky, the consolidation. Then he retired from there, moved, come back here, And the plan was in motion as soon as he came back.
Because I remember there were a couple of students that stood up and were brave enough to speak and say that, there are a lot of parents talking and the administrators and adults are talking, but no one was actually listening to the kids and asking the kids what they wanted.
Right.
What did your kids want?
My kids wanted to stay at Southside. They wanted to graduate from Muncie Southside High School. That was their original decision. And then, of course, when the school closed, it forced their hand to look at other options.
Was that the general sense you got from other kids at Southside?
Sure.
Was it?
I believe probably 98% of them would have said that. You may have had a couple that wanted to move over that may have had previous friends that went to Central or something that wouldn't mind to move over, but there was a loyalty to the school.
Mm-hmm. So Southside meant something to them.
Definitely. Yeah, it was a legacy to the kids growing up. I mean, their parents went there, their parents. I mean, it was something that everybody wanted to be able to go to.
So I get the sense from you that Southside itself had a legacy, a big legacy, even though it wasn't around as long as Central. What do you have to say to the people who were so pro the Central's legacy when you're thinking about the fact that Southside had a legacy too?
I understand where they're coming from. The school had been around since the early 1800s, or late 1800s rather.
Uh-huh.
And they had a lot of things that, as far as championships and different things they were proud of. But, we had championships too on the south side.
Sure.
The year I graduated in 1990, we won the state wrestling championship. That seemed to be swept under the rug. No one, ever even seemed to care about that. But it's been that way since I was a kid. I mean, the south side of Muncie never got the consideration that the north side of Muncie's got. And we grew accustomed to that just the way it is,
Now, do you mean in terms of high schools when you say they haven't gotten the consideration, or do you just mean in general?
In general. Businesses, location. You look at just this week, Dick's Sporting Goods moved to town. Michael's is coming to town. Where are they at? They're on McGuire. And we've got ground that's being cleared right now out by the South Walmart that plenty of businesses could move in. There's empty spots there in the shopping center there at 29th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just empty. Businesses don't even consider that when they're looking at moving to Muncie.
Why do you think that is?
Just for what they see what's already moved out of that side of town. And,
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to go where, Kmart's already closed 20 years ago, where Marsh just went out of business? It's a trend. And people scared to take a chance there, I'm afraid.
All right, well, that kind of concludes all of the formal questions I have for you, but I wanted to open up the floor for you to add anything that you want to, or we could talk about anything that I might have missed that you wanted to discuss today.
The only thing that I would like to add is, I think it was more politically driven instead of student driven as far as the decision making. I believe that Mr. Heller, like I said, had decided when he took over the position that this was the way that we were going, and it was a done deal. I talked on, like I said, in the Star Press interview, and stated after the first town hall meeting, I was interviewed by Fox, by ABC, and I gave him the same consensus in every interview, and it was just a waste of our time. I still took the time to go to all the town hall meetings because, like I said, I wasn't giving up until it was done. But I feel it was all just a big facade for what they were going to do. I mean, they had to make it look good to the people before they come out and made the decision. At the last meeting where they gave the decision, you could hear the rumbles and the people, voicing their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it got pretty heated there at that last decision making.
Sure.
And you could tell that it wasn't what the general consensus of people wanted, but it is what it is, and they made this statement, being the administration, that they didn't feel that parents would actually move their children out of the school system. Well, obviously they did move their kids out of the school system. And if you did the math on that, if they just lost 250 children, it was going to be more money, $25,000 more than what they claimed they were going to save by closing a high school. So another time when the math didn't really make sense on what they were claiming. And, they're giving enrollment numbers in the Muncie Star Press right now saying that, enrollment numbers, they lost some, but they didn't lose as many. But what they're not telling is that they're using numbers from May of last year, or of this year rather, after the first semester, and a lot of the children moved at the end of the first semester of the school year because the county schools were telling us that there may not be a spot if you don't go ahead and move now. So I would almost like to hear the real numbers from the beginning of the year to the beginning of this year to see how many actually left, because the number's more than 250 students, and they lost money instead of gaining money.
Now, when you say kids leaving, do you mean kids of high school age or kids in general of all ages?
Kids of all ages have left. Elementary school children, Monroe Central had to open new classes for elementary school because people are already moving out of the school systems. I mean, if you know it's coming, you want to get your kids geared to the idea right off the bat, get them involved in what they're going to grow up in.
Yeah.
And, I haven't been more happy with the decision we made to move. The administrators, the kids, the way they welcomed you with open arms. One of the things that stands out to me is one of the first day I picked my son up from school. Zane Pollard had dropped his paper, and it was blowing away. It was kind of windy that day. Two of the kids that didn't know him at all, and they stopped, turned, and ran after his paper for him and brought it back to him. That's something you wouldn't have seen at Southside or Central. I mean, they'd have probably laughed at him and scorned him as he went to go chase his own paper.
Yeah.
It's just it's a whole different atmosphere, a whole different world out there. And the parents are actually involved. When we go to the football games on Friday night on an away game, you'll have 350 people at an away game. I mean, there's school spirit. It's really neat. I enjoy the move.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Thanks.